Late tonight, as the Trump administration continues its ICE crackdown in the city of Minneapolis, something we are continuing to watch very closely, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz delivered a remarkable straight-to-camera address to the people of his state. This just happened in the last few hours. And when you watch this clip, I just want you to hold in your mind that this is the governor of an American state talking about what the federal government is doing to the people of his state.
Fellow Minnesotans, what's happening in Minnesota right now defies belief. News reports simply don't do justice to the level of chaos and disruption and trauma the federal government is raining down upon our communities. They're pulling over people indiscriminately, including U.S. citizens, and demanding to see their papers. And at grocery stores, at bus stops, even at our schools, they're breaking windows, dragging pregnant women down the street, just plain grabbing Minnesotans and shoving them into unmarked vans, kidnapping innocent people with no warning and no due process. Let's be very, very clear. This long ago stopped being a matter of immigration enforcement. Instead, it's a campaign of organized brutality against the people of Minnesota by our own federal government. This week, he went online to promise that, quote, the day of retribution and reckoning is coming. That's a direct threat against the people of this state, who dared to vote against him 3 times and who continue to stand up for freedom with courage and empathy and profound grace.
So that is how the end of this day, or near the end of this day, I should say, you never know what can happen in the next few hours, came to a close. The governor of Minnesota talking about organized brutality by the federal government of this country, the trauma the federal government is raining down on his constituents. And those kind of warnings feel more urgent and more necessary every day now, because every single day we all seem to wake up to something. Every day we wake up to some piece of news that reminds us of countries we don't want to be like, that we don't want to live in. And today the news was that Donald Trump's FBI raided the home of Washington Post reporter Hannah Natanson. They searched her home, seized her laptops, her phone, and her smartwatch. Now, as of this moment, we don't know exactly what was on those devices or the scope of the warrant that the FBI used to seize them. But we do know that this kind of intrusion is exactly what freedom of the press advocates fear from the authoritarian governments around the world. If the federal government were to access a reporter's notes, they could identify confidential sources in the government. They could punish those sources for speaking to the press. They could discourage other sources from coming forward and effectively break the system by which a free press holds the government accountable. And never has it been more essential than the moment we're living in. And given everything else in this administration, what they're doing right now, all of it, it's reasonable to think that is exactly what it looks like. And it's notable that the Trump administration chose to try this out by targeting the newspaper, The Washington Post. I mean, after all, this is the paper owned by billionaire Jeff Bezos, who has basically gone out of his way to placate this president and push the newspaper in a more Trump-friendly direction. Now, it's notable that he hasn't come out with a statement condemning this raid and attacking his buddy Donald Trump. I'm not particularly surprised, but it's still notable. Even as the paper's editorial board condemned the raid as an aggressive attack on the press freedom of all journalists, which it is. It's also notable that Trump's DOJ went after this reporter in particular. Hannah Natanson is one of the most well-sourced reporters in the federal government, and she's been doing some of the most dogged reporting on how the Trump administration has upended the federal government from the inside based on conversations with people who work there within the federal government. In the early days of the Trump administration, she broke stories about how the Trump administration was using sensitive Medicare data to hunt down immigrants, how Elon Musk was feeding sensitive government data into AI to decide what to target for cuts, how the Trump administration had canceled government contracts to help veterans, and later, how the Trump administration reversed those cuts after she and her colleagues exposed them. Just 3 weeks ago, she wrote a firsthand account of how she became the Trump administration's federal government whisperer, how she'd obtained more than 1,100 sources from inside the government, from people who had come forward to tell her about how Trump was rewriting their workplace policies, firing their colleagues, or transforming their agency missions. She wrote about receiving urgent signal messages from distressed workers across the federal government, people who said things like, every piece of our data may be at the mercy of unscrupulous people. Now, some of those sources even disclosed that the enormous pressure they were under had resulted in suicidal thoughts, telling Nathanson things like, I think about jumping off a bridge a couple times a day. I want to die. It's never been like this. These are federal government employees, people who have, many of whom have dedicated their lives, decades for some of them, to serving this country, serving in the federal government. And she became a person that federal employees could turn to, someone they trusted enough to tell their stories about how the government was under attack from the president who was elected to lead it. And here's the thing. Nathanson herself isn't even the target of this investigation. The search of her home and the seizure of her devices is part of an investigation into a government contractor who is accused of illegally mishandling classified information about an unidentified country. So, raiding the home of a reporter who isn't even suspected of a crime here is a pretty extraordinary step for the federal government to take. Could it be that they wanted to send a message to government officials and employees to scare them away from speaking to journalists? It's certainly possible. Or worse, could the administration want access to this reporter's devices to identify her sources inside the federal government? That is certainly possible as well. Right now, we don't know what information the federal government could gain access to or whether they could act upon that information. But we do know this raid was implemented by an administration that has put silencing critics at the top of their agenda. Today, Attorney General Pam Bondi said on X that the warrant was executed, quote, at the request of the Department of War, basically meaning Pete Hegseth's Defense Department. Yes, that guy. I just want to take a moment to point out the absurdity of that, given that Pete Hegseth himself famously sent sensitive information about an active military operation to a Signal chat that included a journalist and some that included his own wife. And where we're on the subject of irony, remember when I said that this investigation was about mishandling classified information concerning a, quote, unidentified country? Well, today, someone inside the federal government revealed the name of that country to the press, and you'll never guess who it was, or maybe you'll guess who it was.
Another piece of information that I think is very important is the leaker has been found and is in jail right now. And that's the leaker on Venezuela.
President of the United States, the leaker of on Venezuela. Again, that was the president revealing information his administration had sought to withhold from the public while criticizing someone he says is a leaker. Sometimes you honestly just can't make this step up. Setting aside the Trump administration's hypocrisy on disclosing sensitive information, it's pretty clear what this is all about. Because it's a story we've seen time and time again, whether it's journalists or law firms or comedians or protesters or members of Congress. Trump wants to silence anyone who dares speak out against him.